All right, this is DI 61-1. So let's go ahead and go through this. It says perform the indicated division. So let's do number 1. So setting this up, the x squared plus 4 goes on the outside. The 5x to the 4th minus 3x to the 3rd plus 2x squared. Now notice I don't have an x, so I need to include a placeholder there. Whenever you don't have that given variable, you need to include the placeholder at that spot. And so the two leading terms, let's see how I want to do this. Brushes. So the two leading, oh, yuck. Hee hee. But the two leading terms, you're going to want to go ahead and divide. So 5x to the 4th over x squared. And so when those divide through, you're going to get 5x squared. Then you're going to multiply that with both of those terms there. So you're going to get 5x to the 4th. Now notice 5x squared times 4 is 20x squared. Well, I'm not going to put it under the x cubed part because I can't combine an x squared with an x cubed. I'm going to put it under the 2x squared part because I can combine x squareds with x squareds. Now subtract, so the signs are going to switch. Add straight down, you get a 0. That gets brought down, minus 18x squared. Now we do the same thing. And if you guys want, you can bring down everything. Might be easier. So same thing. Now I need to, this piece and this piece, we divide. So if I need to write that off to the side, do it. So then that looks like minus 3x. Multiply back through. Minus 3x and negative or positive 4. That's going to give us a minus 12x. Subtract, so the signs change. 0, bring it down. Add, bring it down. And then once again, x squared into minus 18x gives us negative 18. Multiply through, 18 times x squared gives us minus 18x squared. Negative 18 times 4, what is that? Negative 72. Subtract, so the signs change. That gets brought down, and I get plus 71. Now this right here is my remainder. Now, if you notice, it wants us to write it in the form of dx times q of x plus r of x. Just to reference, that's kind of like what we're looking at here. So the d of x is this, the q of x is what's on top, and then the r of x is going to be my remainder here. So writing it, and then plus my remainder. And that's my answer. Now for number 2, I'm just going to kind of set it up, but just know that everything is the same. So I do have 9x cubed. I don't have an x squared. I don't have an x. And then I have my plus 5. Now we get uncomfortable here because the first thing that we're doing is 2x as it goes into 9x cubed. Well, the x's cancel out, so I'm left with x squared. 9 over 2, what? Well, what's that? Simplified in decimal. Well, that's 4.5. So we may just have to write it in decimal. And so use your calculator as you go along. Then 4.5 times 2 4.5 times 3, and that's going to be, or negative 3, so that's negative 13.5x squared. We're just going to have to do decimals. That's okay. So, and then 2x as it goes into 13.5, right? So you're just going to have to divide that out. So just know that you may have to use a calculator to do decimals on this. This was number 2. All right, let's look at number 6. So for setting this one up for synthetic division, the radical 3 is what goes in the box. Just remember, because it's the 0, quote unquote. We don't know if it's actually 0 or not, but in ways for us to interpret it. 1, there's no x cubed. I have my minus 6 for the x squared. I don't have an x, and then I have my 9. Add straight down. Multiply. Add. Multiply. You get root 9. Well, root 9 is the same thing as 3. So negative 6 plus 3 is negative 3. Multiply. Add straight down. Now multiply, that gives me negative 3 root 9, but negative 3, this is 3, that's going to give me 0. So writing it in that form, we're going to have to count backwards. This is my remainder, my constant, x squared, x cubed. So it's going to be x minus root 3. That's my d of x. My q of x is this. So 1x cubed plus root 3x squared minus 3x minus 3 root 3. And then plus 0 remainder, because I don't have a remainder. So that's going to be my answer. One thing to just kind of show you guys for number 5, even though it says 3 minus 4x minus 2x squared, it needs to be written in descending order. So then when you do your box thing, so make sure it's in descending order for you to do that. All right. Number 7, it says use the given information to find the remaining trig values. So it says secant of theta equals negative 4 in quadrant 2. So here's quadrant 2. Secant is negative. If cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse, secant is hypotenuse over adjacent. So this is hypotenuse over adjacent. And it wants us to find the remaining trig values, so we're going to have to use the quadratic formula. And that'll be, well, not quadratic, sorry, Pythagorean theorem. And so now I can do sine as opposite over hypotenuse, tangents opposite over adjacent, and find all the remaining ones. See number 9. So I have x is greater than x squared. So if I subtract the x, I get 0. But we said that we always want to compare it to 0 on the other side, so I can flip everything. Right, the inequality is still facing the 0, or the how it opens up is still facing the 0, so I can rewrite it that way. But the way we solve quadratic equations, we can either try and factor it, or we can use the quadratic formula. Well, in this instance, I can factor really easy. So x equals 0 and 1. Now, because it's an inequality, it's regions that give us the solution. So I have to find the boundaries of that region. So here's 0 and here's 1. And I have to test each one. So if I plug in negative 1 times negative 2 is a positive number. If I plug in like 0.5, if I plug in 0.5, I get a positive times a negative. And then if I plug in, let's say 2, a positive times a positive. because 2 times 1 is a positive number. Now this is numbers that are less than 0. Numbers that are less than 0 are negative numbers. And so that region is my answer from 0 to 1. It says graph one cycle. So y equals negative cosecant x plus pi thirds. So we're going to relate this to sine. So x plus pi thirds, you put that between 0 and 2 pi. You would subtract pi thirds. And so you get negative pi thirds is less than or equal to x, which is less than or equal to 5 pi thirds. Draw your box thing. Now you add the ends and divide by 2. So this would be 2 pi thirds. And then if you add the ends and divide by 2, this is going to give us, what is that, pi 6. And then add the ends, divide by 2, that'll give us 7 pi 6. So this is negative 2 pi 6, this is 4 pi 6, and then this is 10 pi 6. And we can kind of tell because it's going up by 3 pi 6 every time. So that means on a number line, for cosecant, so we're pretending like it's sine, so sine, and it's negative, so it's going to go in the opposite direction. And then because it's cosecant, where it crosses the center line is asymptotes, and then it's parabolas at the peaks. For number 11, sine of theta over 2. So this is where we use the half angle identity. And so I want you to look up that half angle identity, to at least do some research. But just remember that we still need to, this is saying 3 pi halves to 2 pi, so that's going to be quadrant 4. And so negative 7 over 25. We're going to have to go through and use that half angle identity. How do I know it's a half angle identity? Well, I'm taking the angle and dividing it in half.